Greetings, dear suckers. My name's Joe Bob, and I'm very peeved. And welcome back to Our Darker Purpose. Another of these interludes to take a quick glance through another chapter of the lore of Our Darker Purpose, of the Edgewood Home for Lost Children. So yeah, last time we went through chapter 1, talked about the grounds, the books, the various bozos and bosses, and of course, briefly touching on the adventures of Shuddering Jim and the Bandit. Now then, on the teachers. The professors at Edgewood were known only by letters. They did not appear to live inside the building, but no one ever saw them leave or enter. They were not unkind. I'm sure you'd say that. Mr. L, Cordy's teacher, was so old that he needed to clutch at the blackboard as he staggered from the door to his desk. From there, however, he lectured thunderously, as if some obscure passage from literature was more than worth the final breaths left to his body. Cordy learned her love of reading from Mr. L. Occasionally, however, he would sit silently and stare out at the students, as if some mystery in their behavior puzzled him. You know, he would say, an idea is difficult to destroy, but perhaps a fragment of one is even more dangerous. You know, he would say, an idea is difficult to destroy, but perhaps a fragment of one is even more dangerous. A peculiar thing to say, to be sure. On the founding. The administrators are vague on the subject of the school's founding and mission, leaving students to guess as to its broader history. A small number argue that it's simply a regular orphanage boarding school in the middle of a vast wasteland. Yeah, the most ordinary place for a regular orphanage boarding school to be. Some believe it is actually a prison of some kind, although no one remembers what they did to merit punishment. Aren't boarding schools usually prisons? Some, pointing to the disjointed architecture and constant change in the building, claim that it must have sprouted naturally out of the rock. An interesting idea. A few outliers argue it is a science experiment, or credit an external group of benefactors they call the 1050, or suggest the whole thing is a form of purgatory. As the administrators explain, it is enough to know that your presence here reflects a broader educational experience. Ta. I'll bet. Gotta love them unsubtly taking a shot there at people who believe that everything is fucking purgatory or some such. Now, okay. 1050. Now, the funny thing about that is that 1050 is... well, there's a few things that are kind of funny relations. For instance, 1050 milligrams is supposedly the standardized dose for cordyceps supplements. Cordyceps. Which is especially funny since they are, as well as the obvious association with cordy, they're also used to decrease the proliferation of cancerous cells, which is especially funny because the zodiac sign Cancer is depicted as a crab, which, well, you probably wouldn't know why that's important, but rest assured it'll be explained in like chapter 4 why the association with crabs. And there are other associations too. For instance, if you break it down, 10 is associated with J, because it's the 10th letter of the alphabet. J for Jim. And 50 could be broken down further into 50, meaning police. Anyway, there's that, and probably other associations beside, which is very funny, because most likely none of these are relevant, because 1,050 is how many people were fool enough to donate to the Kickstarter for this game. Hence, Kickstarted. See at the bottom there? Even the thing that it gets, Vistas, something like that, expands the number of rooms per stage, is a reference to, well, stretch goals on a Kickstarter. So probably none of those other associations are relevant. Unless the 1,050 number was manipulated in some way. Point is, none of this stuff on the founding lore bit is really that relevant, besides telling you, yeah, this place is weird. But you already knew that, didn't you? I'm fairly certain that all of these theories are nonsense. Besides maybe the first one. From a certain point of view, anyway. But we'll get to that. On the Archivists. Yeah, we saw those earlier, the guys that lead you to the secret rooms. That occasionally have an Archivist boss fight. Children wandering the hallways at night will sometimes come across ghostly figures scribbling in notebooks. Some believe that these Archivists are former students gone mad from the constant changes in Edgewood's architecture, and that their notes represent an attempt to create consistency within the school. Others say that their goal is to prove that the school has no consistency at all. That's essentially the same task, isn't it? To prove one, you'd have to disprove the other. And if you want to prove something, you should set out to disprove it. The Archivists can pass through walls and doors, and seem only loosely tethered to the reality of the building. They seem to annoy the administrators, who only comment that a history of Edgewood is unnecessary, for Edgewood is already a history. Now that's an interesting turn of phrase. Archivists are rarely seen, and no one knows how many there are. Mr. L once hypothesized that there are a near-infinite number of Archivists, spread across a near-infinite number of rooms. Mayhap? You belong in a museum. Edgewood plans, I forget what that does. Oh wait, no, now I remember what it does. It's that terrible item that just tells you where the boss is. Ugh, I regret unlocking it. So yeah, these guys, I don't know what their deal is, but honestly, I think what their deal is probably a lot less important than what the administrators have to say about them. Or rather, about Edgewood. Already a history. Already a history. What a queer thing to say. The Capulets. Although every student feared Goneril's physical strength, they also knew that Regan was even more powerful. Her followers, the Capulets, are pretty, well-dressed, and universally envied. It was they who convinced Kevin the Timid to try to climb the weather vane that extended off the high northern terrace, and drove little Robert to squeeze himself down through the heating ducts into the cellars. In the aftermath of the disappearance, the Capulets have moved to the upper floors, and graduated to something darker than simple manipulation. Oh yes, complex manipulation. Many students worry about the strange markings that Capulets leave on the walls, or how they seem to be able to summon flames and ice on command, or the possibility that they've allowed still more malevolent forces than themselves to enter the school. Is that so? Is such a thing even possible? Well, perhaps it is. Perhaps it is. At least one thing, at the very least. And perhaps she's to be feared the most out of the entire trio. Perhaps. The obsolete operator. Edgewood students may not use the house elevator under any circumstances. Instead of a control panel, a freestanding mechanical creature waits inside the car and controls its movements. It is unclear whether the elevator's creatures installed the operator as well, or if the device somehow sprouted organically from the collection of gears and fan belts and wires beneath the car. The appearance of new elevator doors in various points of the manor, and attendant cracks and groaning sounds, suggests that the elevator is pushing itself through the house like a root system. Some insist that the muffled rasping coming from the walls is the operator sobbing. Ah yes, the good old operator. It's one of those bosses that's in the running for the easiest boss in the entire game. All it does is float around aimlessly, occasionally create little minions like the trash cans and such, and occasionally create spikes that are telegraphed 5 to 10 business days ahead of time and trivially easy to avoid. Don't even need to roll. I can't remember the last time I actually took damage from it. And I've been fighting it in hard mode quite a few times. It's not even difficult in hard mode. It does start really fucking spamming the ground spikes thing, but it's so fucking telegraphed that it's still easy to avoid. And again, you don't even need to roll, so you don't even need to stop hitting it to avoid them. Not unless you're out of position, I suppose. Very, very, very easy boss. So, I wouldn't blame it if it was sobbing. The Frozen Few. Ah, yes. Also, fairly easy, but kind of fucking annoying, because it can very easily get cheap hits on you. You're not gonna die to it, though. You're just not. It doesn't. Even if you get into a damage race with it, you're guaranteed to win that. Rule breakers in the dining halls used to be rewarded with a stay in the enormous Edgewood freezer. Children shivered next to countless cuts of horned beef steak, which is a pretty good item, and barrels of old milk. Don't think that's an item. Offenders traditionally stayed from noon until the groundskeepers came by in the early evening to unlock the door. Unfortunately, a group was already inside on the day that Frothy the Dragon burst through the floor of the kitchen, incinerating tables and snapping at the cooking staff. Weeks passed before the groundskeepers managed to drive him away. When they tried to open the freezer, they discovered that the students had sealed themselves in. Now that's interesting. You'd think they would have died in those weeks, frozen to death, but instead, they survived and perhaps even thrived and no longer want to leave. Recent attempts to communicate with the Frozen Few, as they are called, suggest they have taken up strange beliefs and rituals. As if that's unusual in Edgewood. Their shadows are sometimes visible through the frosted glass. It is possible that they will emerge by choice, perhaps months or years from now, when they run out of food. None of the other students appear cheered by this prospect. Indeed. In hard mode, this boss becomes a bit more difficult because it starts chilling you constantly over time. Kind of annoying. Slowing you down. But it's feasible to deal with. It's a lot easier to deal with if you have the power lesson. Because you can just bust right through the mazes without having to put yourself in a position where you'll get hit without being able to avoid it. Anyway. The quiet exit. Ah, right. I forgot about this. The thing that shows up the second time you beat Goneril. Oh. I remember that achievement. The cowering woundwarts emerged from the remains of their fortress to see Cordy standing over their former leader. They threw down their globes and chairs and erasers to see what the terrible girl would do next. Cordy seemed to hesitate for a moment, as if she were trying to find a memory. Then, she pushed quietly through their ranks, walking towards the next flight of stairs. Just like that. And here one might think that the woundwarts would be ashamed, and forget their old ways, and pledge to help her on her journey. Unfortunately, being woundwarts, they were more prone to hatred and anger. They swore to avenge Goneril, and to hunt Cordy up through every floor of the orphanage, or at least as high as they felt comfortable going. The Capulets lived above them, after all, and even woundwarts aren't altogether stupid. Well, no good deed goes unpunished, eh? Bastards. Well, I didn't expect any better from them. The Disciplined. Yes, we avoided that one. Several days after last year's Harrowing Eve celebration, the head of odd name. The head of punishment at Edgewood locked himself in the detention room with a group of the school's most problematic students. Over the course of a week, he coerced them into human reenactments of classic chess openings on the tiled floor. The obedient ones rose up to become knights and rooks, while the less cooperative remained pawns. Ironic, considering the use of the term pawn as a euphemism. I've always thought that was particularly stupid. I mean, chess metaphors in general are stupid, but that one of particular stupidity. I mean, look at the other pieces. The rook, the knight, the bishop, the queen, and even the king. By the usual metaphorical nonsensory, they are all pawns. Every piece on the board is, metaphorically speaking, a pawn. Just like every position. The pawns, the rest of the pieces, the positions, the board itself, the game itself, they're all the same. It's only utter nonsensory that really puts these sorts of silly metaphorical barriers between these things. But never mind. I have made my distaste for chess metaphors as a whole abundantly clear. Eventually, the administrators ordered the door broken down and the head of punishment replaced, as the situation was unfair to students who required punishment but could not access the room. Yes, that's the concern here. The students involved were never found. Odd that it would specify knights and rooks, since you only encounter kings, rooks, and bishops in that, but never mind. The Disciplined is certainly in the running for most fucking annoying boss in the entire game. He spends the entire time running away from you in these annoying, so fucking annoying to actually hit him, because he can so incredibly easily dodge your attacks because they're so fucking slow, and he practically snaps to position. Constantly running away, constantly fucking hiding behind the other pieces, which are completely invincible, by the way, because fuck you. And it's just absolute fucking headache to deal with him. I wind up taking a lot more damage than I probably should just to get it fucking over with already. Because it's just so unbearably unfun to play against. And in hard mode, well, it's even worse because he has like twice as many pieces to protect him. But frankly, it's already so fucking annoying that the additional annoyance of hard mode barely registers. Anyway, Sindar's Timekeeper. Rumor has it that an orphan named Sindar, I don't know, was deposited on the steps of Edgewood alongside a magnificent grandfather clock. Although none of the groundskeepers could get the clock to start, the administrators declared that it deserved a place of honor at the center of one of the largest halls in the manor. No one noticed the thin chain that gradually emerged from its front compartment over the years, wrapping itself around desks and tables and extending through the air ducts the linked one room to another. Also, how the fuck do they not notice that? Seems very unobservant. I guess there's weird shit going on in Edgeworth all the time. It's too much to notice. The grandfather clock started at the instant it hooked around Sindar's foot, dragging him horribly through the house before he was pulled into the machinery. The administrators deny almost every element of this story, but also refuse to tell the students what actually happened to the clock in the main hall. Naturally. Yeah, this one's not so bad. Pretty beefy, but stationary, so not hard to hit. It's got a whole mechanic of the time bubbles that speed you up. Honestly, I spent most of my time playing this beating him without using those time bubbles, like actively avoiding them, because I thought they were a debuff of some kind, because time speeds up. Sounds like it's making things harder, but it only speeds up time for you, not the enemy, so... But yeah, but even without them, it's not that difficult. Honestly, I'm not even certain they're really that helpful. And, as I mentioned in the last episode, if you have sufficiently powerful damage output, you can sort of stun lock him by going through the stages of his health faster than he can sort of get those stages of his attacks really into full gear, so he never actually becomes a threat, which is pretty fun. But honestly, he's not so bad in general. Even on hard mode, where he is kind of a threat due to the time bubbles slowing you down instead, and also even more vicious fuckery, and occasional stuff, and occasional patterns which have zero ability to dodge, he's still not that bad. Honestly, he might be one of the closest bosses in the game to, like, actually just a decent boss. Not outrageously difficult, not pathetically easy, not unless you have ridiculous damage output, which is not entirely uncommon, but still. It's just, you know, he's just this guy, you know? Anyway, the lore seems to be the usual Edgewood fuckery. I don't know. It's not a character that appears anywhere else, I don't think. But anyway. Speaking of fucking annoying bosses, the friendly footstools. Some students claim that they've awoken to a cacophony of muffled clacking noises and low shapes moving through the dormitories. While these reports are generally ridiculed or ignored, it is true that the footstools seem to disappear as quickly as the groundskeepers can replace them. One theory is that the administrators have devised some kind of hideous creature tasked with enforcing curfews. A minority believe that Regan may be responsible, noting the dozens of disjointed snake diagrams that have been observed in her notebooks. Hundreds of dozens? That's a weird turn of phrase. This last argument seems far-fetched, given the strict house regulations about attempting to communicate with Edgewood's furniture. You tappers. Ah yes, one of the last achievements I got in the game. Beating without taking damage. Fuck this, boss. That is all. And yes, the trick with the mirror. Already went through that. And also how terrible Regan's lunchbox is. And now for excerpts from Shuddering Jim and the Bandit. The case of the walking desk. I was gonna say it's pretty obviously this one, but those are footstools, not desks. So it's probably talking about the regular enemy that's a walking desk. You know, I'm pretty sure we've seen some of those. Pretty innocuous enemy, honestly, which is why there's usually like half a dozen or so of them at once. Just concerned? The general chuckled. Hardly. Robbing a few helpless civilians, that's one thing. That dagger is unique, a gift for the ambassador, and I have 100 soldiers surrounding the building. We're in a desert too, if you haven't noticed. We'll see them coming from a mile away. Shuddering Jim seethed. Everyone says that, he said. And they always win. Always. The bandit always gets the stupid treasure. He snarled at the ring of officers standing around them, preening in their khakis and special goggles. He outsmarts you. He gets inside your head. But I swear to all of you, before this is over, someone is going to get inside his. Startled, the officers fell silent. Behind them, the bandits' henchmen slithered by, their camouflage mirroring the sand. Book 16 in the Shuddering Jim series, page 39. Edgewood Library, number 8240192. Inside his, huh? What an interesting turn of phrase. The case of the flying ice. This one, I assume? Although Regan also shoots flying ice, and a few others do, too. The bandits' henchmen filed into the kitchen. They ignored the soup bubbling over the stove, the potato sacks scattered haphazardly about, the broken glass crunching under their feet. The chef with the mustache found himself crowded onto the long chopping counter. Mustache, huh? The bandit's refined voice floated into the room from the hallway. My dear friend, he said, I fear that your employ in my household has come to its conclusion. He had almost reached the door. A recording device in a mutton chop, the one dish I would never eat. Very creative. And I think I know who put you up to it. The bandit rounded the corner and locked eyes with the chef. Then his mouth opened, and his hand flashed to the wall. Shuddering Jim threw himself from the counter at the same moment the bandit threw his cleaver. The knife skewered the chef's hat and pinned it to the stove. The knife skewered the chef's hat and pinned it to a stove. One of the henchmen made a grab but caught only the fake mustache. Jim's momentum carried him over their surprised arms and through the bay windows, the giant ones that overlooked the sea. The last thing he remembered was the fall. Book 23 in the Shuddering Jim series, page 151. Edgewood Library, number 8240192. Fake mustache, huh? Well. Again, make a note of that one. It'll be important later. The case of the madman's stew. obviously Cauldron of Yesterdayers. I can't think of anything else that it could be. Well, maybe one other thing, but probably that. Tacks, the museum curator muttered. They're leaving tacks everywhere. Reminds you of someone? Shuddering Jim winced. No one knew what poison the bandits' assassins had used, but it was likely to be permanent. The doctors let him continue to clutch Hansel's dome, the ancient dinosaur skull, the one he had given so much to protect. Chalk on your hands, the curator whispered, staring calmly at the skull. Punish the prisoners, the ones who threw fire. Yesterday this man had lectured Jim for 10 minutes on the pronunciation of Cretaceous. Now his voice went up like a child singing a nursery rhyme. Chalk hands, chalk girls, clap for them and clap some more. Chalk, huh? Through fire. Jim sighed and walked out. The curator was useless, and Jim was so wrapped up in his thoughts that he didn't notice the laundry cart, the one with 2 eye holes cut into the front, wheeling itself towards the curator's room. Book 29 in the Shuddering Jim series, page 211, Edgewood Library, number 8240192. The Case of the Mechanical Vendor. Obviously, I don't remember what they're called, but the vending machines that we buy items from. Shuddering Jim hung, bound and upside down, in the bandit's trophy room. His head ached from the soporific they'd stuck him with. It took my henchmen 2 shots, the bandit said. Curious, as they almost never miss. But there you were. Tranquilized in the terrace topiary, if I may. You may not. Jim stared at the lion's head on the wall in front of him. Oh, I see you've noticed, the bandit said. Native to the Tectic Mountains, the nomads who live there refuse to look at the beast after they kill it. They believe that the memory of an enemy can be as dangerous as the enemy itself. He smiled as he left the room. I'd be curious for your opinion, but I believe my assistants are eager to speak with you as well. Jim heard the 2 henchmen step forward, cracking their knuckles. He tried to keep his back to them. The second tranquilizer dart, the one that had deflected off Jim's badge, was still hidden in his shirt pocket. 1 tranquilizer dart for 2 henchmen. Better make it count. Book 36 in the Shuddering Jim series, page 232, Edgewood Library, number 1924832. It's a break in the pattern, as I'm sure you might have noticed. 82409192. Peculiar. The others don't seem to have that pattern. Nor do they even have the same numbers. I don't know what these numbers mean, honestly. I only recently noticed the connection between these 3. Although I've only recently really been looking into the lore, but never mind. All I know about that number is that it's a postal code in Japan. Somewhere in Kyushu, I think. So yeah, things to note here. Getting in people's heads. Fake mustache. Tacks and chalk. And prisoners. And throwing fire. The ones who threw fire. Well, we know Regan and Cordy both throw fire. I don't know about Goneril, though. Chalk hands, chalk girls. Tax, fire, chalk. The memory of an enemy can be as dangerous as the enemy itself. And finally, a moment rewritten. A girl named Cordy awoke under a broken bookcase, confused and scared, having barely survived Goneril and Regan's attack in Mr. L's classroom. Every time a Cordy awoke under the bookcase, of course, the school was different. Edgewood's stability and purpose, however, requires that every student is always the same. Stability and purpose, huh? Unlike the others, every Cordy was slightly different. This one had confused memories of terrace bramble and flying ice, of Goneril's followers building fortresses, and of Regan floating above the ground. Perhaps certain questions came to her. How long, exactly, had she been asleep? How many times had she awoken? Why would she keep returning here? An old lesson from Mr. L may have occurred to her. An interesting question for you to consider, he had said, is this. Can a memory itself remember? And can it be redeemed? What a peculiar question. I feel like it's one of those ones that is utterly maddening, only so long as you don't define your terms. But if you actually defined what you mean by memory, remember, and redeemed, and itself for that matter, you would probably have already answered your own question. Much like the age-old, if a tree falls down with no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? Or what is the sound of one hand clapping? Questions which are essentially their own answer, if you actually bother to define the question. Redemption, huh? Redemption. Redemption, memories, fragments of ideas, history. Yes, these themes have seemed to present themselves here in Chapter 2. And what is up with these three having the same number? What is up with that? Is there some sort of link between these three? I don't know, but at least we'll be sure. It could also be that it's just a typo, and they meant to have different numbers for these, but they accidentally copied the same one over 3 times. I certainly would not put it past them. Also, look, we're already up to book 36. Yeah, this is a long runner. Although you have no idea how long a runner it is. Just wait. Can a memory itself remember? I mean, perhaps you can remember remembering things, can't you? Metacognition, isn't it? If your mind can be aware of its own thinking, then surely your own thinking can be aware of its mind. But is that at all what it's talking about? I don't know. But at least we'll be sure. Sure of what? I don't know. Ah yeah, that one unlocks Vanishing, which I think is the teleportation one, which would be really good if it actually worked. I suppose that's an interesting question for you to consider, dear audience. As well as, well, everything else. Fragments of ideas, broader educational experience. Edgewood is already a history. Getting inside, gets inside your head. Getting inside his head, even. Fake mustache. Tacks everywhere, chalk on your hands, punish the prisoners. The ones who threw fire. Chalk hands, chalk girls. The memory of an enemy. Yes. Chapter 2 has left us with even more questions than Chapter 1, and perhaps even less answers. If such a thing is possible. But that is all that we have for today. Next time we go back to actually playing the game, unfortunately. But that, and the episode after that, will be Chapter 3, and then we reach into the end game at last. And with any luck, some actual answers at last. But until then, I have been Joe Bob, and I'm very peeved. And remember, dislike the video, unsubscribe if you're for some reason subscribed, and leave a nasty comment in the comment section down below. Fuck you all so much for watching, and so long, suckers.